Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is great to have you with us. Today, we are shifting gears. We spent a lot of time on the show talking about how medicine fixes things, setting a bone, stitching up a cut, fighting off a nasty bacteria. It's usually a repair job, right? Or a defense job against some kind of foreign invader.
Right. And usually we are identifying something that is clearly other, a virus, a bacteria, a parasite, and the whole goal is just get it out.
Exactly. But today, we are heading into a territory where the rules of engagement are, well, they're completely different. We aren't talking about fighting a foreign invader. We are not talking about fixing a broken machine. We are talking about a civil war.
That is exactly the right metaphor. It is the defining characteristic of the topic we are covering today, oncology, cancer pharmacotherapy. When we treat an infection, we are fighting them. When we treat cancer, we are fighting us.
Us gone wrong. Us gone rogue.
Precisely. And that single fact, that paradox, it sets the stage for everything we are going to discuss. We are diving into Pharma 65, specifically focusing on the principles of cancer pharmacotherapy. And our theme for this deep dive is treating growth without losing the host.
Which sounds like a pretty high-stakes balancing act.
It is the ultimate balancing act. I mean, the central paradox of oncology is this. How do you kill the rebellion without destroying the country? How do you poison the cancer cells without poisoning the patient to death? Because unlike a bacteria that has a cell wall, something our human cells don't have, cancer cells are just our own cells that have lost their instructions. They use the same machinery, the same fuel, the same DNA as your heart, your lungs, and your brain.
So finding a weapon that hits only the bad guys, that's incredibly difficult.
It's almost impossible. And that brings us right to the core concept of the therapeutic index. In infectious disease, with something like penicillin, the index is huge. You can give a massive dose because the drug targets a bacterial cell wall. Human cells don't have walls. We have membranes. So the target, it simply doesn't exist in the host. You can fire at will.
So it's safe for the host, but absolutely deadly for the bug.
Right. But in cancer, the drugs target DNA synthesis. They target cell division. They target the very machinery of life. And since your healthy cells, especially the ones in your gut, your mouth, your hair follicles, your bone marrow must divide to keep you alive, they are directly in the crossfire. The therapeutic index in oncology is razor thin. The dose that cures the cancer is terrifyingly close to the dose that kills the patient.
Constrained aggression. That's the term that kept popping up in my mind as I read the source material. We have to be aggressive, but we're handcuffed by the fragility of the host.
Exactly. Now, to help us navigate this minefield, we are using two specific sources today. We are pairing them to give you a conceptual map.
All right, let's introduce our guides. First, we have Kat-Sung chapter, Cancer Chemotherapy.
Think of Kat-Sung as the scaffolding. It provides the clinical organization, the practical how-to, the dosing schedules, and the classification of the drugs. It structures the chaos of the hundreds of drugs we have available.
And then we have the heavy hitter on the molecular side, Goodman and Gilman chapter, General Principles in the Pharmacotherapy of Cancer.
And Goodman and Gilman gives us the why. It dives deep into the molecular reasoning, the systems-level view of tumor evolution, and the mechanisms of resistance. It explains the biology that necessitates the drugs in the first place.
And we should say this up front, right? This deep dive is an interpretive synthesis. We are building a revision scaffold for you. We are not reading the textbook to you.
Absolutely not. You must read the chapters. This discussion is designed to make that reading easier, to give you those aha moments so that when you see a chart in the book, you understand what it actually means for a patient sitting in a chair.
So our mission today is to understand the logic of the poison.
Yeah.
Why do drugs act where they do? Why is one drug rarely enough? And crucially, why is timing everything?
Let's start with the battlefield. I mean, if we are going to fight a civil war, we need to know the terrain. And in oncology, the terrain is the cell cycle.
Okay, section 1, the enemy in the battlefield. I really like the visual in Kat-Sung. It's figure 54-2. It depicts the cell cycle clock. I think a lot of people just think of cells as growing, but it's a very specific, scheduled process.
It is. It's like a factory assembly line. And if you want to sabotage the factory, you need to know exactly what is happening at each station. You can't just throw a wrench in the front door. You have to throw it into the specific gear that's turning at that moment.
Walk us through the stations on this clock then. Where does it start?
It starts with G1. Think of G1 as the pre-synthesis phase. The cell has just been born from a previous division. It's small, it needs to bulk up. It's gathering enzymes, synthesizing RNA, producing proteins. It's the build-up phase. It's like the factory ordering all the steel and plastic it needs for the day's work.
Okay, so raw materials are coming in, The warehouse is getting stocked. The cell is getting ready for something big.
Then the cell commits, it passes a checkpoint and enters S phase. S stands for synthesis. This is the most critical part of the cycle for many of our drugs. This is where the DNA, the master blueprint, is actually copied. The entire genome is unzipped, read, and replicated.
The photocopier is running hot in S phase.
And this is a time of incredible vulnerability. If you are unzipping your DNA to copy it, it is exposed. It's fragile. If you throw a wrench in the gears during S phase, you don't just stop the copy, you can shatter the blueprint itself. The cell recognizes the blueprints are ruined and usually self-destructs.
Okay, so S phase is done. We have 2 complete sets of DNA. What's next?
Next is G2. This is the pre-mitosis phase. Think of it as a quality control checkpoint. The cell is synthesizing the microtubules and all the components it's going to need to physically pull itself apart. But more importantly, it's checking the DNA for errors. It's asking, did we copy this right? Are there any typos? Is everything ready for the split?
And if it passes that final inspection?
It enters M phase, mitosis, the physical split. The cell divides into 2 identical daughter cells, and then, and this is the crucial part that distinguishes cancer behavior and drug effectiveness, the cell has a choice. It can go right back into G1 and start the loop over, or it can exit the cycle and enter G0.
Zero. You called it the bunker.
Yes, G0 is the resting state. The cell is metabolically active, it's alive, it's doing its job, consuming energy, but it is not dividing. It has stepped off the assembly line. It's sitting in the break room.
And why is that distinction between a cell that is actively cycling and a cell that is resting in G0 so important for the drugs we use?
Because most of our traditional drugs are designed to attack a moving assembly line. This leads to the major classification in CATSM, CCS versus CCNS.
Let's break those acronyms down for everyone.
CCS stands for cell cycle specific. These are drugs that only work when the line is moving, and usually only at a very specific station. For example, antimetabolites, which we'll discuss later, only work in S phase. Taxanes only work in M phase.
So let me get this straight. If I have a tumor where it's 90% of the cells are just sitting in that G0 bunker, and I give a drug that specifically targets M phase.
You miss 90% of the tumor. The drug just floats right past them. They're completely invisible to it because they aren't performing the drug targets. CCS drugs are highly effective against high-growth fraction tumors, tumors where nearly every cell is running the race, like certain leukemias or lymphomas, but against a slow, sleepy tumor, they really struggle.
So for the guys in the bunker,
Yeah.
if the sniper fire of CCS drugs won't hit them, what do? We can't just leave them there.
You need the heavy artillery. CCNS, cell cycle nonspecific. These are drugs like the alkylating agents. They damage the DNA directly. They don't care if the DNA is being copied in S phase or if it's sitting in a file cabinet in G0. They basically pour superglue into the file cabinet. They are chemically reactive.
Oh, they can kill resting cells. That seems like a massive advantage. Why not just use those all the time?
It is a huge advantage, but there's a really important nuance from the text. They still work better on cycling cells.
Why is that? If they damage everything, why does cycling matter at all?
It's all about repair time and checkpoints. If you damage the DNA of a G0 cell, it might just sit there for a week, a month. It has time to realize there's glue on the zipper and maybe call in a repair crew. A cycling cell, though, might be on a 24-hour clock. It has to divide. It rushes to the M phase checkpoint, tries to divide with damaged DNA, fails the inspection, and triggers apoptosis, cell death. So even the heavy artillery prefers a moving target, but it can hit a stationary one.
This brings us to a fascinating historical point from the text. The story of the mouse versus the man. The L1210 model. It sounds like a spy novel title, but it's actually foundational biology for this entire field.
Ah, yes. This is Pharmacology History 101. Back in the 60s and 70s, we developed many of our core theories, including the way we schedule drugs today, using the L1210 murine leukemia model in mice.
As we know, mice aren't tiny men.
No, and their cancers aren't always like ours. In this specific mouse leukemia, the cancer grew incredibly fast. The growth fraction was nearly 100%. Every single cell was running the cycle. There were essentially no cells hiding in G0.
So it was the perfect target for chemotherapy. The enemy was entirely out in the open field, no bunkers.
Exactly. It was a best-case scenario for our drugs. And from this model, we derived the crucial log-kill hypothesis.
Explain the math here, because log kill sounds like something from a video game, but it's actually a strict mathematical rule that dictates how we treat patients every single day.
It means that chemotherapy follows what we call first-order kinetics. A given dose of a drug kills a constant fraction of cells, not a constant number.
So if I give a dose, it doesn't kill, say, 1 million cells. It kills 99.9% of the cells, regardless of whether there are a billion of them or just 1,000.
Precisely. Let's do the numbers because this is key. Say you have a detectable tumor with 10 DEL cells. That's 10 billion cells. You give a treatment that achieves a 3-log kill. That means you kill 99.9% of them.
That sounds like a cure. 99.9% is gone. If I kill 99.9% of an invading army, the war would be over.
It feels like a cure, but do the math. 10 minus 3 logs is 177. You still have 10 million cancer cells left in the body. You haven't killed zero. You've just reduced the population from a grapefruit to maybe a pea.
And those 10 million survivors, they aren't just sitting there feeling sorry for themselves.
No, they start growing immediately. This is why you can never cure a cancer with one dose. You have to give a dose, knock them down to 107.7. Then you have to wait maybe 2 or 3 weeks for the patient's gut and bone marrow to recover from the poison you just gave them.
But in that 3-week break, the cancer grows back.
Maybe it grows back to 181. Then you hit it again with another cycle. Knock it down to 105 VIs. It's a stair-step battle, a race. You have to kill them faster than they regrow.
And the problem with a human model, the reality for our patients,
is that humans aren't mice with L1210 leukemia. Human solid tumors, colon cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer are much slower. They have lower growth fractions. Many cells are hiding in G0.
So the log kill isn't as efficient. We're not getting that 3-log kill.
Right. We might only get a 1-log kill per cycle, or even less. This explains the fundamental difference you see in the clinic. It explains why leukemias and lymphomas are often highly curable with chemo. They act like that aggressive mouse model. But slow-growing solid tumors are incredibly difficult to cure with chemo alone because the kinetics are against us. The enemy is in the bunker, and our best weapons are for an open-field battle.
That is such a crucial piece of context. It explains the frustration of the field for so many years. It's not that the drugs are weak. It's that the math is hard. So we know the enemy is hiding. We know one shot won't get them all. This leads us perfectly into Section 2, the strategy of combination. Why is one drug rarely enough?
Well, we moved into the era of combination chemotherapy because single agents, what we call monotherapy, almost never cure advanced cancer. There are a few rare textbook exceptions like choriocarcinoma or Burkitt lymphoma, but for the most part, if you want to cure, you need a squad. You can't send in a lone soldier.
Katsung outlines the 5 principles of combination chemotherapy. I want to go through these one by one because this is the logic that determines what actually goes into the patient's IV bag. It's not random at all. Not at all. It's very deliberate, very strategic design. Let's do it.
Principle number 1, efficacy.
This one sounds obvious, but it's vital. Each drug in the combination must be effective on its own against that specific cancer. You don't combine a drug that works with a drug that does nothing, just to add volume or complexity. If drug A has a 0% response rate in colon cancer, you don't put it in a colon cancer regimen. Every member of the squad has to be a proven killer.
Principle 2, toxicity. And specifically, the text emphasizes non-overlapping toxicity. This seems like the most complex puzzle piece to fit together. It is the central constraint. It's the art of oncology. Every drug has a cost to the host, a side effect. Let's say drug A is fantastic, but at high doses, it destroys the kidneys. We call that nephrotoxicity. And drug B is also fantastic, and it also destroys the kidneys. If I give them both at the same time, at their full effective dose, I will absolutely destroy the patient's kidneys. To make it safe, I'd have to cut the dose of both in half.
And cutting the dose makes them weaker against the cancer.
You lose your punch, exactly.
Oh.
But what if I pick drug A, which is tough on the kidneys, and I pair it with drug B, which is tough on the bone marrow? We call that myelosuppression.
Okay.
And then I add drug C, which is tough on the nerves, causing neuropathy.
You can get full doses of all 3.
Yes. You can hit the patient with the full cancer-killing intensity of all 3 drugs. You spread the damage across different organ systems of the host. The kidneys take a hit, the marrow takes a hit, the nerves take a hit, but no single system is completely obliterated, and the host survives. Meanwhile, the tumor gets blasted by the full intensity of all 3 drugs simultaneously. The tumor doesn't have kidneys or bone marrow, it just takes the hit.
That is deviously smart. You are diversifying the collateral damage in the host to maximize the attack intensity on the tumor. Okay, principle 3, optimum scheduling.
This is all about that recovery gap we talked about. We cycle the drugs, treat, wait. The length of that wait period is defined by the recovery time of the most sensitive normal tissue. That's usually the bone marrow, specifically the neutrophils, which are a type of white blood cell. We wait just long enough for the neutrophil count to bounce back to a safe level, but not so long that we give the tumor too much time to regain its ground.
It's a race. And the assumption is that healthy, normal tissue tends to recover slightly faster and more predictably than disorganized, chaotic tumor tissue. We're exploiting that tiny window.
Exactly. We are leveraging the body's natural, organized resilience against the tumor's chaotic growth.
Okay, principle 4, mechanism of interaction.
This gets into what we call biochemical blockade. We want to attack different pathways at the same time. If one drug blocks the production of DNA bricks, we want the second drug to block the cement, or maybe a third drug to sabotage the delivery truck. If we block the front door, the tumor might try to escape out the back door. We want a drug waiting at the back door.
This prevents the tumor from finding a detour.
It prevents resistance, or at least it makes acquiring resistance much, much harder. The odds of a single cell randomly mutating to survive drug A are low, but possible. The odds of that same cell having simultaneous random mutations that let it survive drug A, drug B, and drug C all at once are astronomically low.
And finally, principle 5. The text highlights this as a crucial concept: avoidance of arbitrary dose changes.
This is the one. This is the one that every medical student, every junior doctor needs to tattoo on their brain. It's where the art of medicine can sometimes hurt the science of it.
Why is it so important? It sounds compassionate to lower a dose if a patient is struggling.
It does, but it can be devastating because of the sigmoidal dose-response curve.
Paint that picture for us. What does that curve look like?
Imagine an S-shaped curve. On the x-axis, you have the dose, and on the y-axis, you have the tumor cell kill. At low doses, the line is flat zero killing. Nothing is happening. Then you hit a certain threshold, and the line shoots almost straight up. It's incredibly steep. Then it flattens out at the top, where you get maximum kill. We aim for the top of that steep section.
Okay, so you're operating on a cliff's edge, basically.
A cliff's edge. Now, imagine a clinician is treating a patient with curative intent. The patient is tired, nauseous, miserable. The clinician thinks, this is really hard on them. I'll just reduce the dose by 20%. It will still work, but they'll feel a bit better.
That sounds like a reasonable, compassionate thing to do.
It is compassion, but it can be fatal compassion in a curative setting. Because that curve is so steep, a 20% reduction in dose doesn't mean a 20% reduction in effect. It might mean you fall off that cliff. You might get a 50% or even an 80% loss of cure rate. You might turn a potentially curative treatment into a completely useless one just to spare the patient some nausea for a few days.
So the mantra is go hard or go home.
In curative intent, yes. Dose intensity, the amount of drug delivered over time, is the primary driver of cure. Now, if the goal is palliation, just comfort, then sure, lower the dose. But if you are trying to cure someone, you cannot compromise on intensity.
Okay, we have the strategy. We know the rules of engagement. Now let's open the armory. Section 3. The arsenal. Katzung and Goodman and Gilman break these down by their mechanism. We can't cover every single drug, but we need to understand the main classes. Let's start with class 1. The deceivers, the antimetabolites.
I love that name, deceivers, because that's exactly what they do. These drugs mimic natural substances that the cell needs. They are highly S-phase specific. They look like food or building blocks, but they are traps.
The Trojan horses of the cellular world.
Let's look at the classic one, methotrexate. It's an antifolate. Your cells need folic acid to make thymidine, the T in the DNA code, ACGT. Methotrexate inhibits a critical enzyme called DHFR, dihydrofolate reductase. By blocking that enzyme, it basically cuts off the supply of thymidine. The cell goes to build DNA, reaches for a T-brick, finds the shelf is empty, and the whole assembly line grinds to a halt. The cell dies.
Then we have 5-fluorosil, or 5-FU, a workhorse in GI cancers.
5-FU is the false brick. It looks almost exactly like uracil or thymine. The enzyme thymidylate synthase picks it up, thinking it's a normal piece of DNA, tries to use it, and bam, it gets stuck. It forms a covalent bond that jams the enzyme forever. It just completely shuts down the factory line.
Now, there is a very specific, very dangerous issue with 5-FU mentioned in the text. DPD deficiency. This feels like something everyone listening needs to file away.
This is a crucial clinical sidebar. DPD is the liver enzyme that breaks 5-FU down and clears it from the body. It's the cleanup crew. The problem is about 5% of the population is genetically deficient in DPD. They either don't have it or have very little of it.
So what happens if you give one of those patients a standard dose of 5-FU?
Catastrophic toxicity. They can't metabolize the drug. The drug levels in their blood skyrocket and stay high for days and days. You see severe life-threatening diarrhea. The bone marrow is completely wiped out. We call that pancytopenia. And severe neurotoxicity. It can absolutely be fatal.
Is this something we test for now?
Increasingly, yes. Pharmacogenomic testing before starting 5-FU or its oral form, capecitabine, is becoming a standard of care to catch this hidden danger. It's a perfect example of how personalized medicine is entering the field.
Okay, one last deceiver in this group. Gemcitabine.
Ugh. Gemcitabine is particularly sneaky. It's an imposter. It gets incorporated into the growing DNA chain. The builder, DNA polymerase, adds it to the chain. Then it adds one more normal base after it. And then the polymerase realizes, wait, the shape is wrong. But because of that extra base it added, it can't back up to fix the mistake. It's called masked chain termination. The construction freezes solid and the cell dies.
All right, let's move on to class 2. The saboteurs. The alkylating agents and the platinum compounds.
These are our CCNS drugs, the heavy artillery we talked about. This group includes the nitrogen mustards, like cyclophosphamide, and the platinum agents, like cisplatin and oxaliplatin.
How do they work? What's their sabotage method?
Think of DNA as a zipper. To read it for instructions or to copy it, you have to unzip it. Alkylating agents are like chemical superglue. They form strong, covalent crosslinks, either on one strand or between the two strands of DNA. They glue the zipper shut.
And if you can't unzip the DNA?
You can't replicate. You can't make proteins. You're dead in the water. The cell detects this massive structural damage and triggers apoptosis cell suicide.
And because they rely on this direct chemical reaction, this gluing, they don't need the cell to be actively cycling.
Correct. They can hit the cells resting in G0. They are chemically reactive. It's an interesting historical note that the first ones, the nitrogen mustards, were actually derived from mustard gas used in World War I. Doctors noticed that soldiers exposed to mustard gas had very low white blood cell counts. Their bone marrow was suppressed.
So they made the leap. If it kills normal white blood cells, maybe it can kill cancerous white blood cells, like leukemia.
Exactly. It was the birth of chemotherapy, turning a weapon of war into a medicine.
But these come with a serious cost. Cisplatin, in particular, is famous for its side effects.
It is a heavy metal, and it acts like it. It is intensely immunogenic, meaning it causes severe nausea and vomiting. Before we had modern anti-nausea drugs like ondansetron, people would sometimes stop curative treatment just to escape the relentless severe nausea of cisplatin. It is also highly toxic to the kidneys. It's nephrotoxic and to the nerves.
Okay, class 3, the spindle poisons. These come from plants, right? The vinca alkaloids and the taxanes.
Nature is a brilliant chemist. These drugs target the M-phase mitosis. Specifically, they attack the microtubule skeleton inside the cell.
And the microtubules are like the ropes and pulleys that pull the chromosomes apart when the cell splits into two.
Precisely. We have two families here that do the exact opposite thing, but with the same result. First, the vinca alkaloids, like vincristine, which come from the periwinkle plant, they prevent the ropes from forming. They cause microtubule disassembly. The skeleton dissolves. The cell gets to M phase, tries to divide, but has no machinery to pull the DNA apart.
And the taxanes, like paclitaxel.
They do the reverse. They cause microtubule assembly and stabilization. They freeze the skeleton solid. They prevent the ropes from disassembling. The cell gets stuck in the middle of the split, frozen in place, unable to finish.
So either way, mitosis fails. The cell can't divide.
And it dies. It's worth noting, paclitaxel originally came from the bark of the Pacific yew tree. It was a huge environmental issue for a while because it took decades to figure out how to synthesize it, and we were stripping forests to get this drug.
Finally, class 4, the sledgehammers, the anthracycline antibiotics. And the big one here is doxorubicin.
The red devil.
Why do they call it that?
2 reasons. First, because it is a bright red liquid. When you infuse it into a patient, their urine turns red for a day or two. It looks terrifying, and patients need to be warned about it. And second, because, frankly, it is a terrifyingly potent and toxic drug. It's a true sledgehammer.
Why a sledgehammer? What makes it so different?
Because it has a triple mechanism of action. 1, it intercalates DNA. It wedges itself between the base pairs to distort the shape of the double helix. 2, it inhibits topoisomerase X. That's the enzyme that untangles the DNA coils during replication. But 3, and this is the big one, it generates a storm of oxygen-free radicals.
So it creates this massive chemical storm inside the cell.
Yes. It literally shreds the DNA with oxidative stress. But this mechanism is also what leads to its unique and most feared toxicity, cardiotoxicity.
Damage to the heart?
Yes. The heart muscle, the myocardium, is unique. It lacks the enzymes, catalase, and superoxide dismutase that most other tissues use to neutralize free radicals. So while the liver and other organs can clean up the oxidative mess doxorubicin makes, the heart takes the full brunt of the damage.
And this damage is permanent. It doesn't heal.
It is cumulative and irreversible. It leads to cardiomyopathy and eventually heart failure. That's why there is a strict lifetime cumulative dose for doxorubicin. Once a patient hits that limit, they can never have the drug again no matter what. We sometimes use a cardioprotectant called dexrazoxane to try and soak up the iron and reduce the radicals, but the risk is always there.
So we have this incredible arsenal: deceivers, saboteurs, spindle poisons, sledgehammers. It sounds unbeatable. But Section 4. The enemy fights back. Resistance.
This is the tragedy of oncology. It's the central challenge. You treat a patient, the tumor shrinks on the scan, it disappears, everyone celebrates. 2 years later, it comes back. And this time, the drugs don't work.
How does the cancer survive that kind of onslaught?
The Goldie-Coleman hypothesis explains it best. It's a mathematical model, but the concept is pure Darwin. Tumors are genetically unstable. They are mutation factories.
So the resistance isn't something the drug creates. The chemo doesn't teach the cell to be resistant.
No. This is so important. The resistance mutation existed before you ever opened the pharmacy cabinet. Imagine you have 1 billion cancer cells. By pure random chance, maybe 50 of them have a mutation that makes them resistant to doxorubicin.
Okay, so you give the chemo, you kill the 999,999,950 sensitive cells. It looks like a great response.
A fantastic response. But those 50 survivors, they look around, the competition is gone, the food is plentiful, they replicate, and a year later, the entire tumor that grows back is made up of the descendants of those resistant cells. We didn't create resistance, we selected for it. It's Darwinian evolution, and fast forward, right inside the patient's body.
And what about the cellular defenses? The text mentions a key player called P53.
P53, it's called the guardian of the genome. It's a tumor suppressor protein that scans our DNA. If it sees damage, like the kind of damage our drugs are designed to cause, it halts the cell cycle and tries to initiate repairs. If the damage is too great to be repaired, P53's job is to trigger apoptosis. It tells the cell to commit suicide for the good of the organism.
So our chemotherapy actually relies on a functioning P53 to finish the job.
Exactly. The drug causes the damage, but in many cases, P53 is what pulls the trigger. The problem is, in over 50% of human cancers, the P53 gene itself is mutated or deleted.
So the guardian is asleep at the wheel.
Or dead. So you hit the cancer cell with chemo, you damage its DNA, but there is no P53 to say, hey, you're too damaged, you need to die. The cell just shrugs off the damage, keeps dividing, and now it has even more mutations. It becomes a kind of zombie, cell-damaged, but relentless.
And then there's the even more direct method of resistance, the MDR pump.
Multi-drug resistance. This is mediated by a protein called P-glycoprotein. This is a literal transporter pump that sits on the cell surface. It recognizes the chemotherapy drug that managed to get inside the cell and uses energy to actively spit it back out into the bloodstream.
Like having a little sump pump bailing water out of a sinking boat.
It's an incredibly efficient pump. And what's worse, it can pump out many different types of structurally unrelated drugs, making the cell resistant to the whole cocktail at once.
Is there any hope in tracking this evolution in real time? The text mentions something called liquid biopsies. This sounds like the future.
This is the exciting frontier. Goodman and Gilman has a great section on this. They discuss ctDNA circulating tumor DNA.
So we can actually find the cancer's genetic code floating in the blood.
Yes. As tumor cells die or turn over, they shed little fragments of their DNA into the bloodstream. With modern sequencing technology, we can collect a blood sample, find that tumor DNA, and sequence it. We can see resistance mutations like a KRAS mutation in colon cancer or an EGFR mutation in lung cancer appearing in the blood months before a tumor actually grows big enough to show up on a CT scan.
That is a huge advantage. It's like seeing the enemy changing their uniforms and battle plans before they launch the next attack.
It allows for what we call adaptive therapy. We can see the resistance coming and switch drugs before the clinical failure happens. It changes the game from being reactive to being proactive.
Let's bring all of this together with a real-world example. Section 5, clinical integration. The so what part, the case study from the text.
This scenario from the text is perfect because it illustrates almost all the concepts we've just discussed. We have a 55-year-old man. He goes for a routine colonoscopy. They find a mass. The biopsy confirms colon cancer.
So he has surgery. They cut out the piece of the colon with the tumor. Surgeon comes out and says, I got it all, the margins are clear. The patient feels great, he has no symptoms, he thinks he's cured.
But then the pathology report comes back on the tumor and the nearby lymph nodes they removed. It's stage 3. 5 of the 12 lymph nodes they took out tested positive for cancer cells.
So even though the main visible tumor is gone, the cancer was already on the move. It had escaped into the lymphatic system.
Right, and this is when the oncologist comes in and recommends 6 months of aggressive chemotherapy, a regimen called FOLF-OAKS, which is 5-FU, leucovorin, and oxaliplatin. And the patient asks the question we always get. Why? I feel fine. The surgeon got it all. Why poison me now?
This is the concept of adjuvant therapy, right? Treating a disease that you can't see.
Exactly. The surgeon removed the macrometastases, the big tumor, the 10 cells. But the positive lymph nodes tell us there are almost certainly micrometastases out there. Invisible seeds of cancer, maybe only 144 cells hiding in the liver or the lungs.
And we can't see them on any scan. They're too small.
Not yet. But if we leave them alone, in 2 years they will grow into tensomers and he will have incurable metastatic disease. This is where the log-kill logic actually works in our favor for once. Chemotherapy is most effective when the tumor burden is small and the growth fraction is high, which is true for micrometastases.
So we strike now while the enemy is scattered and weak to kill the seeds before they can grow into trees.
We are gambling on a cure, and this brings us to the final critical distinction: curative versus palliative intent.
In this case study with the 55-year-old man, the intent is clearly curative.
Yes. We are trying to wipe it out forever. And because that is the goal, we accept high toxicity. We use high dose intensity. We don't cut the doses. We tolerate the neuropathy from the oxaliplatin, the diarrhea from the 5-FU. We accept that the next 6 months will be miserable because the prize is a normal lifespan.
Contrast that with a patient who comes in already with large tumors in their liver and lungs that cannot be surgically removed.
That's a different world. If the cancer is already widespread and metastatic, we usually cannot cure it. The resistance is likely already present, the tumor burden is too heavy, the goal shifts to palliation.
So how does the treatment strategy change then?
The goal is now quality of life and symptom control. It's about buying good time, not just time. We might lower the dose to make it more tolerable. We might choose a drug with fewer side effects, even if it's slightly less effective. We are trying to control the cancer, not eradicate it. And there is no point in making the patient spend their remaining time in the ICU suffering from the side effects of a treatment that was never going to cure them anyway.
So the why you're treating dictates the how.
Always. You must know your intent before you write the first chemotherapy order.
As we wrap up, let's look toward the future. The outro, the evolution of the field. We spent this whole time talking about these heavy toxic drugs. Is that still the only way?
For many solid tumors, it's still the backbone. But we are definitely moving from the era of carpet bombing, using these toxic CCNS and CCS drugs that kill anything that moves, to the era of sniper fire.
Targeted therapies.
Exactly. Monoclonal antibodies, tyrosine kinase inhibitors like imatinib for CML, drugs that are designed to target the specific mutation that is driving the cancer, which means they can spare most of the normal cells.
But the text leaves us with a provocative final thought, this idea of oncogene addiction.
It's a fascinating concept. It turns out some cancers are so completely dependent on a single mutated pathway, they are addicted to it. It's like a whole house of cards held up by just one pillar. If you can design a drug that knocks out that one specific pillar, like blocking the BCR-ABL gene in chronic myeloid leukemia, the whole cancer just collapses. It's a miracle when it works.
There's always a but with cancer.
There's always a but. Cancer is resourceful. If you block the main pillar, the tumor evolves. It finds a bypass track. It activates a different gene, like CMT, to build a new pillar and keep growing. The war is never static. We block the front door. They use the window, we brick up the window, they start digging a tunnel.
So the fundamental principles of cell kinetics, of combination therapy, of resistance, they remain the bedrock of oncology, even as the specific drugs get smarter.
They do. The biology of the host and the biology of the rebel cells are locked in this evolutionary dance. Treating growth without losing the host will always be the central challenge.
Well, that was quite a journey, from the idea of a civil war inside the cell all the way to the logic on the prescription pad.
It's a deep and complex field. For the listeners, I highly recommend going back and looking at figure 54:1 and Ketsung to see those log kill curves for yourself. And read chapter 65 in Goodman and Gilman for the molecular details on resistance we just touched on.
The sources are your map. We just tried to point out the most important landmarks. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It was a pleasure. Stay curious.